Common misconception among creative entrepreneurs: if your spouse or your significant other isn't an active employee of your business, that there's no real way they can support you in your work.
But over the last 8 years of working together both officially and unofficially, we found that just isn't true.
So today, my husband Matt and I are going to be sharing 3 ways that you can support your spouse or significant other who works in the creative industry without being an active part of their business. This is Bite Size Business, where we're helping creative entrepreneurs become the hero of their own creative small business. I'm your host, Abby Grace. This is my husband, Matt. I'm an international photographer who also loves educating for creative entrepreneurs. So here on Bite Size Business, we do a lot of strategy for creative entrepreneurs, as well as tips and tricks for growing photographers. So if that sounds like your brain of strawberry jam, make sure you guys hit subscribe. So before we dive into our 3 tips, I thought it might be helpful if we take you guys through a brief history of how it is that we came to work together. So these days, Matt and I are a full-time husband and wife team, but it wasn't always that way. So I began my business in 2010, and Matt didn't start helping out until 2015. And that wasn't for a lack of trying, because he definitely tried to get me to accept help, and I was so stubborn and stuck in my own ways that I thought I was the only one who could do things the way that I did. When I finally began accepting help in 2015, it was bit by bit, and it was with the intention of hopefully bringing Matt on as my business partner.
It was like pulling teeth sometimes to let me help her.
Yeah.
It was really hard to tell her that I can actually do these things that she doesn't want to be doing.
It was a lot of pride in me, and sometimes a little bit of lack of faith in you, and not because you weren't worthy of faith. It's just because I think a lot of creative entrepreneurs have this tendency to think that, like, I'm the only one who can do this thing for my business the way that I do it. Even down to something as silly as I'm the only one who can go to the post office the way that I do, which is absurd because going to the post office is a very basic task.
And I just really hated watching Abby suffer with these tasks that are menial that she doesn't want to actually do. And so I just really wanted to help her.
That were keeping me from doing the actual significant work that moved our business forward.
Yeah.
So in 2015, like I said, Matt started coming on with small tasks. We gave him small projects to see how he did with those, balancing those with his other full-time job at the time. And then throughout a history of Matt doing each of those projects really, really well, and showing me that not only is he capable, but he was far more capable than I ever gave him credit for, because he didn't work in the creative industry. That was, I think, where some of that doubt was coming from. But you showed yourself so capable that in 2016, he ended up leaving his full-time day job to come on as my business partner. But from the time that I started my business in 2010 to the middle of 2015, when Matt began to help in a more official capacity with our business, Matt was, even though he wasn't an employee of Abby Grace Photography, he was still an integral part in doing what I did. And that came out in several ways, but we broke those down into 3 main tips. So we're going to get into those now, but I wanted to give you guys a brief history just so you kind of knew where we were coming from. So Matt, let's dive into it with tip number 1.
Little tasks have a big impact, especially on large projects. So when I started out with Abby, it was just doing simple things like taking stuff to the post office for her, which was really natural because I had a post office on the way to work, and so it didn't really disrupt my day that much at all.
And I hated going to the post office, which further calls into question why I clung to that task for so long. See, post office runs had become a huge bottleneck for me. I'd accrue packages in my office that needed to go out, and I would put it off and put it off and put it off, and then I started getting emails from clients like, hey, where's our album? Because we've kind of been on the lookout for it. So I was actually damaging the client experience by refusing to give up that task. So when Matt came on, not only did he take a piece off of my plate that I hated doing, but he also bettered our client experience by getting those packages to our clients in a more timely manner, sometimes even before they were asking for them, or sometimes even before they were expecting them.
Another small task that I did was I made lunches for Abby and her second shooter on the wedding day.
So because Matt wasn't coming with us on the wedding days, that means that he didn't need to worry about getting dressed or getting ready the morning of a wedding. And so while I was getting dressed and ready, Matt made lunches. And then you also, a little further down the line, then started checking my photography bag for me, making sure all my equipment was there. And one thing that I loved that you did was you packed the car. I hate packing the car before a wedding. I don't know why. I like being able to just walk out the door, get in the car, and go. And so Matt made that even easier for me to arrive to a wedding stress-free by doing some of those tasks that either I don't like or ones that often made it impossible for me to get out the door in a timely manner.
Yeah, and just being able to take away that stress level from her just was really helpful, not only for her, but for me on the wedding day too, because I always get so nervous just feeding off of her energy too.
Mm-hmm. And I know for me personally that if I arrive to a creative job stressed out, I'm not going to be in the best frame of mind to serve my client well, peacefully, and with joy. And so Matt doing anything that he could to help cut down on that stress made me even better equipped to do my job when I got to a wedding day. The common thread amongst all the ways that Matt helped out with my business was that none of them were artistically based. See, Matt's not an artist. He doesn't do any of the photography, editing, design, anything for our business. That's all in my wheelhouse. And that's part of the reason I had such trouble accepting help at the beginning, was because I thought since Matt wasn't a creative in the traditional sense, that there was no way he could understand or replicate what I do. And that's a good thing, because we don't need him to replicate what I do. And so what Matt did was he took his own skill sets, which lie in servant-heartedness and strategy and systems, like finding better ways, more efficient ways to do things. He took those gifts and found ways to fill in the cracks in my business where stress was starting to seep in. And his gift blessed our business in ways that I probably never would have been able to, because my gifts are not servant-heartedness or systems or strategy.
Yeah, and this doesn't have to be just for wedding photographers. So let's say your spouse or significant other is a calligrapher, and you have a bunch of envelopes that need to be stuffed for a
Like
wedding.
150 envelopes.
Yeah, you can come alongside and help do that, and just make a party out of it. Put on some music.
Or Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec.
Pour a bottle of wine, maybe a glass of wine.
Yeah, maybe a glass of wine. Maybe by the end you want a whole bottle.
I don't know. I've never stuffed 150 envelopes.
But that could be something that you can just make fun and have fun together.
Yeah, I think the point of all of that is, if your significant other or spouse is a creative and you are not, that doesn't mean you're not qualified to work together. It just means you need to take a look at what are your unique gifts and how can you use those to bless that business.
Number 2, be a sounding board.
So one of the best ways that Matt's been there for me in our business is just by listening. Maybe I have a problem that I need to talk through, or a tricky email that I need to write, or an idea that I want to process through. And Matt just simply being willing to be there and listen, actively listening to me as I'm talking through the issue or the complicated email or the idea, has been more valuable than I can put words to. See, I used to think because Matt wasn't a creative that there was no way he could contribute in that way, even if it wasn't giving feedback, just by listening. But Matt's unique life experience and work experience is more valuable than I can put words to, because he's coming from a different perspective. He has different ideas than I do. So even if I just come to him to listen, sometimes the ideas that he provides to me are better than I could have come up with on my own.
Yeah, and she's not necessarily looking for a solution from me. She just needs somebody to either vent to or just talk through, and just sometimes get that creative juices flowing for her. And sometimes I can provide that just by having a crazy outside the box idea that she can actually go through and run with.
And as the creative spouse, it is helpful if we're talking through something, if I'm not necessarily looking for ideas, for me to tell him that at the beginning, like, hey, I just need you to listen. I'm not necessarily looking for feedback. I just want to talk this through to get through the kinks of it in my own mind.
Number 3, have an open dialogue about the future of the business. So during the first 2 years that Abby was building her business, she worked her corporate job, and I could just tell it was really weighing on her.
So I was working like 8 to 5 at my corporate job, and then coming home in the evenings and working 5:30 to 10:30, sometimes later, and then all day Saturday and all day Sunday as I was building Abby Grace Photography, and it was exhausting.
I mean, that's true, and I just, frankly, I missed her all the time. It was really hard having those Saturdays either by myself or coming home and seeing Abby at the table hunched over on her laptop after having worked a full day of work. It was just really hard.
And I think part of that is just a necessary part of the hustle to build a new small business. So what we're not saying is like never hustle hard, but what I am saying is that if you're going to hustle hard, that there needs to be clarity between you and your significant other as to where that hustle is heading. I think the idea of hustling 24/7 like we were doing, like with no end in sight, can be really destructive to our relationship and to the dreams of the creative small business owner. And so clarity is the key when it comes to knowing where that business is heading, because you knew from the very beginning that I wanted to take Abby Grace Photography full time. And so when things finally came to a place where I couldn't do both anymore, it wasn't a shock to you when we started talking about, okay, what is it going to take for me to leave my full-time job?
Yeah, and having clear goals enables you guys to have a safe, great space that you can dream and see where you want to go with the business. If it's just, full time, or if it's just, want to have a side hustle, but just so you guys are on the same page, it's so helpful, especially being supportive of that.
Yeah, and I think just the key there is having open dialogue between the two of you. If you want to go full time, don't be afraid to tell your spouse that, but also being willing to hear from your spouse, your significant other, that maybe that's not realistic at this point in time. Or if your spouse is hoping that you want to go full time and you have no desire to do that, no desire to quit your day job, or no desire to enter into a realm of creative small business ownership that's takes more of a commitment than what you've already signed up for, that's okay. Just be honest about that. Be super open so that neither one of you is taken aback when one of you announces dreams for the business that you hadn't previously verbalized. Parting thoughts, don't be afraid to offer help, especially if you can tell that your significant other needs it. Sometimes we creatives are just a little too proud to admit that we can't do everything by ourselves, so it takes 3, maybe 12 offers of help before they finally cave. But if you can see an area of need and you know that you can meet it, just keep after them, because you could make an enormous difference not only in their bottom line, but also in just their quality of life.
As long as you guys keep the communication line open, you guys will be just fine.
That's all we've got for you guys today. As every YouTuber ever asks, make sure that you guys give this episode a like and then definitely subscribe, because there is so much more goodness where that came from. Catch you guys next time on Bite Size Business. Why did you wave?
Why not?